So I've got a book I'm really excited to talk to you about. It's called Dark Matter, and it's by Blake Crouch. This is actually another book that I picked up at my local bookstore because of Emily Fox. She's talked about it a lot and seems to make a lot of her top book lists. So when I saw it in the shop, I picked it up, and I'm so glad I did. It's outside of my real comfort zone of YA fantasy with magic. It's still definitely within my wheelhouse. I really like a good mystery. This is a little bit more of a thriller than a mystery, but they have a lot of the same elements. And it's got a little bit of science fiction in it too. So I've been really excited to recommend it to friends and family members, and I'm excited to tell you about it and recommend it to you too. While I kind of slide into the quick overview of the book and kind of the events that happen in it, I'm not really going to be able to share a lot of those because it's a thriller, and if I tell you sometimes even just the bare bones of what happens, that throws everything off. So instead I'll just tell you kind of how the book starts out, which is we follow Jason Dessen, a father and a science professor, on a night where he's having a nice family dinner. Family decides to send him out on an errand for some ice cream, and while he's out, he also decides to stop by and congratulate an old friend for an award that he's won. While he's on his way back, thinking about kind of how his life turned out and different paths he could have taken, he's met with a gun in the small of his back. And little does he know that the true terror is later down the line. So something new I've decided to try out is to use a scale of 1 to 5 to go from palatable to all audiences and more mature. So for the point of view, I would rate this one about a 2. We stick with Jason's point of view almost the entire time, but there is a foray or two into other points of view. And for that reason, as well as some plot related reasons, it's not the absolute easiest thing in the world to follow the narration and kind of the timeline and stuff. But I still only rate it as the 2 because it is still quite easy. Jason is always our point of view. And so that definitely helps. So I would say that this point is definitely a 5 out of 5. It can get quite complex. With this being a kind of sci-fi based thriller, there is a lot of contemplating science and learning rules and laws of science, which it's not necessary going into this book. Crouch does a good job of explaining through Jason, or sometimes people who he's talking to, any science concepts that are important to understanding the book. But that can be a little hard to take on board if you're a newer reader and just having trouble imagining kind of the setting of the stage in the moment, to then take a step further to be thinking about these scientific terms and these more abstract thoughts. And that's one real reason why I rated it high. But another, I think, very important aspect is there's a lot of contemplativeness in the book. A lot of what happens in the book kind of centers around thinking about the path not taken, or how life would have been if you did X or Y, and all these different paths that your life could have diverged from its current trajectory. If you would have done this differently, where would you be now? What would happen? Would it be pretty similar? Would it be wildly different? I think that self-examination goes quite deep in this book, and so it would be on the more mature side of things. So both are reasons why I gave it a 5 in this category. So once again, I would go with a 2 in this category. It's not that there's no romance. Jason has a wife, and a lot of the book is about him thinking about his wife, trying to be with his wife and taking care of her, but there's just not a lot of focus on their intimacies. It's mostly talking about them being together as individuals and loving each other and having that fully fledged relationship, unless that I want to touch your butt relationship. There are a few points in which there is sex, but in what I've kind of been calling YA fashion, it's a lot of talk about the elation before or in the middle or after, and not really a description of the intimate deeds happening in the moment. So I think that makes it palatable for almost all audiences, but it's still talking about sex, and not everybody's there yet. So that's why it's not a 1. So I decided to go with a 4 in this category because there's a lot of violent acts that happen throughout the book. In fact, the book really is kicked off with a major threat of violence. Jason is taken with a gun in the small of his back and threatened into moving to a secondary location. There's also more violent acts throughout the book, but it never felt overwhelming to me. It felt like just the right amount to really make it a thriller, to push the tension when it needed pushed. It always felt like there was a little bit of something to worry about, but then when something violent or scary would happen, then things would get even more tense and scary. And so I think the pacing of it was fine, and I never really felt overwhelmed with any of the violence. The closest I got was there was a scene that was pretty detailed about how to draw your own blood, and I'm not really a fan of that kind of stuff, so that gave me a little bit of the shivers, but that was the bloody thing that struck me as the most detailed in that book. So yeah, that's kind of why I go with a 4 out of 5. It's not overwhelming, but it's very present. I feel like this part will be a little shorter than usual since it's a thriller, and I feel like that then means I can't share too much, or that might give something away. I would say this is definitely a 4 out of 5 for me. I think the only reason why I wouldn't rate it a 5 out of 5 is it's not my preferred genre. It's not something that I get overly excited about because I don't seek out these kind of books, but it was really good. I think that as far as thrillers go, it did a really good job of maintaining a certain level of being tense throughout the entire book. You never really felt safe. You never really knew for sure what was going to happen next, even at the lulls. And then it would rocket up to where there'd be some kind of chase or threat of violence. And so then things would get scary and would get more tense or even thrilling. But I really liked how it made me think more, both in a scientific mindset and a moral mindset. The scientific, I like to learn still, but a lot of it is kind of shallower dives, just touching on subjects here and there, not really getting quite as deep, and not really looking at these kinds of scientific ideas and theories. And so that was really fun to read about those and to kind of feel like I was learning in that regard. And then with morality, I feel like we kind of retread a lot of the same ground in fantasy. I still love it, but there's a lot more that you can examine about the human condition and morality and all of that in science fiction. I feel like there's a lot of, even if we can, should we? And I feel like that was kind of here a bit in this book, but there was just a lot of, kind of like I said in the morality section, a lot of examining if I were to do things differently, if I were able to go back and change things, how would that affect, what I enjoy today? If I were to go back and change this terrible mistake that I made, well, maybe that would keep this awesome thing from happening. Or something like that. And I think that's something that a lot of people think of, but I really like the conclusion that Jason came to at the end of the book in all of his journeys and all of the things that he learned and kind of where he settled on the matter. So I think it's definitely worth checking out. So that was my review of Dark Matter by Blake Crouch. I would personally rate it a 4 out of 5 just because it's not my very favorite genre and didn't super break the mold by gripping me and shaking me. But I would say if you like thrillers, it's probably definitely a 5 out of 5. Hits a lot of good notes, I think. And like I said at the start of the video, I'm already recommending it to friends and family. I feel like it's got a little bit of something for everybody. But hopefully you decide to give it a try and feel the same once you've finished it. But that's all I have. Thank you so much for stopping by, and I hope you have a great day. Bye for now.